The Qianlong Emperor. September 25, 1711 February 7, 1799, was the sixth emperor of the Manchu-led Qing Dynasty, and the fourth Qing emperor to rule over China proper. The fourth son of the Yongzheng Emperor, he reigned officially from October 11, 1735 to February 8, 1796. On February 8, he abdicated in favor of his son, the Jiaqing Emperor, a filial act in order not to reign longer than his grandfather, the illustrious Kangxi Emperor. Despite his retirement, however, he retained ultimate power until his death in 1799. Although his early years saw the continuation of an era of prosperity in China, his final years saw troubles at home and abroad converge on the Qing Empire. Early years, Hongli was adored both by his grandfather, the Kangxi Emperor, and his father, the Yongzheng Emperor. Some historians argue that the main reason why Kangxi Emperor appointed Yongzheng as his successor was because Qianlong was his favorite grandson. He felt that Hongli's mannerisms were very close to his own. As a teenager he was very capable in martial arts, and possessed a high literary ability. After his father's succession in 1722, Hongli became the Prince Bao. Like many of his uncles, Hongli entered into a battle of succession with his older half-brother Hongxi, who had the support of a large faction of court officials, as well as Yinsi, Prince Lian. For many years the Yongzheng Emperor did not appoint anyone to the position of crown prince, but many in court speculated his favoring of Hongli. Hongli went on inspection trips to the south, and was known to be an able negotiator and enforcer. He was also chosen as chief regent on occasions, when his father was away from the capital. Accession to the throne. Even before Hongli's succession was read out to the assembled court, it was widely known who the new emperor would be. The young Hongli had been a favorite of his grandfather, Kangxi, and his father alike. Yongzheng had entrusted a number of important ritual tasks to him while Hongli was still a prince, and included him in important court discussions of military strategy. Hoping to avoid repetition of the succession crisis that had tainted his own accession to the throne, he had the name of his successor placed in a sealed box secured behind the tablet over the throne in the Palace of Heavenly Purity. The name in the box was to be revealed to other members of the imperial family in the presence of all senior ministers only upon the death of the emperor. Yongzheng died suddenly in 1735, the will was taken out and read out before the entire Qing court, and Hongli became the sixth Manchu Emperor of China. He took the era name of Qianlong. After the first three quarters means heaven, ish means eminence, which means lasting eminence. Frontier wars. The Qianlong Emperor was a successful military leader. Immediately after ascending the throne, he sent armies to suppress the Mur rebellion. His later campaigns greatly expanded the territory controlled by the Qing dynasty. This was made possible not only by Qing strength, but also by the disunity and declining strength of the inner Asian peoples. Under Qianlong, the Dzungar Khanate was incorporated into the Qing dynasty's rule and renamed Xinjiang, while to the west, Ili was conquered and garrisoned. The incorporation of Xinjiang into the Qing Empire resulted from the final defeat and destruction of the Dzungars, a coalition of western Mongol tribes. The Qianlong Emperor then ordered the Dzungar genocide. According to Qing scholar Wei Yuan, 40% of the 600,000 Dzungar people were killed by smallpox, 20% fled to Russia or Kazakh tribes, and 30% were killed by the army, in what Clark described as the complete destruction of not only the Dzungar state but of the Dzungars as a people. Historian Peter Perdue has argued that the decimation of the Dzungars was the result of an explicit policy of massacre launched by the Qianlong Emperor. Khakur Mongol rebels under Prince Chinga I-Njav had plotted with the Dzungar leader Amir Sana and led a rebellion against the Qing at the same time as the Dzungars. The Qing crushed the rebellion and executed Chinga I-Njav and his entire family. For the compilation of works on the Dzungar campaign-like strategy for the pacification of the Dzungars, the Qing hired Cao Yi and Jiang Yunzi at the Military Archives Office, in their capacity as members of the Hanlin. Poems glorifying the Qing conquest and genocide of the Dzungar Mongols were written by Cao. Cao Yi wrote the Yanpu Zaji in brush note style, where military expenditures of the Qianlong Emperor's reign were recorded. The Qianlong Emperor was praised as being the source of 18th-century peace and prosperity by Cao Yi. The Zheng'an genocide has been compared to the Qing extermination of the Jinchuan Tibetan people in 1776, which also occurred under Qianlong's reign. When victorious troops returned to Beijing, a celebratory hymn was sung in their honor. A Manchu version of the hymn was recorded by the Jesuit Amwat and sent to Paris. Throughout this period there were continued Mongol interventions in Tibet and a reciprocal spread of Tibetan Buddhism in Mongolia. After the Lhasa Rite of 1750 he sent armies into Tibet and firmly established the Dalai Lama as ruler, with a Qing resident and garrison to preserve Qing presence. Further afield, military campaigns against Nepalese and Gurkhas forced these peoples to submit and send tribute. The Qianlong Emperor sought to conquer Burma to the south, but the Sino-Euro-Burmese War ended in complete failure. He initially believed that it would be an easy victory against a barbarian tribe, and sent only the Green Standard Army based in Yunnan, which borders Burma. The Qing invasion came as the majority of Burmese forces were deployed in their latest invasion of Siam. Nonetheless, battle-hardened Burmese troops defeated the first two invasions of 1765 1766 and 1766 1767 at the border. The regional conflict now escalated to a major war that involved military maneuvers nationwide in both countries. The third invasion led by the elite Manchu bannermen nearly succeeded, penetrating deep into central Burma within a few days' march from the capital, Ava. But the bannermen of northern China could not cope with unfamiliar tropical terrains and lethal endemic diseases, and were driven back with heavy losses. After the close call, King Jiaqing redeployed his armies from Siam to the Chinese front. The fourth and largest invasion got bogged down at the frontier. With the Qing forces completely encircled, a truce was reached between the field commanders of the two sides in December 1769. The Qing kept a heavy military lineup in the border areas of Yunnan for about 1 decade in an attempt to wage another war while imposing a ban on inter-border trade for 2 decades. When Burma and China resumed a diplomatic relationship in 1790, the Qing unilaterally viewed the act as Burmese submission, and claimed victory. The circumstances in Vietnam were not successful either. In 1787 the last King Le Chi Thong fled Vietnam and formally requested that he be restored to his throne in Thong Long. The Qianlong Emperor agreed and sent a large army into Vietnam to remove the Tay Son. The capital, Thong Long, was conquered in 1788 but a few months later, the Chinese army was defeated and the invasion turned into a debacle due to the surprise attack during Ta Ti by Nguyen Hue, the second and most capable of the three Tay Son brothers. The Chinese gave formal protection to the emperor and his family, and would not intervene in Vietnam for another 90 years. Despite setbacks in the south, overall the Qianlong Emperor's military expansion nearly doubled the area of the already vast empire, and brought into the fold many non-Han Chinese Euro such as Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Evenks and Mongols Euro, who were potentially hostile. It was also a very expensive enterprise. The funds in the imperial treasury were almost all put into military expeditions. Though the wars were successful, they were not overwhelmingly so. The army declined noticeably and had a difficult time facing some enemies. The Jinchuan area took Euro 3 years to conquer Euro. At first the Qing army were mauled, though Yongzheng later took control of the situation. The battle with the Dzungars was closely fought, and caused heavy losses on both sides. At the end of the frontier wars, the army had started to weaken significantly. In addition to a more lenient military system, warlords became satisfied with their lifestyles. Since most of the warring had taken place, warlords no longer saw any reason to train their armies, resulting in a rapid military decline by the end of Qianlong's reign. This is the main reason for the military's failure against the White Lotus sect, at the very end of Qianlong's years. Cultural achievements. The Qianlong Emperor, like his predecessors, took his cultural role seriously. First of all, he worked to preserve the Manchu heritage. which he saw as the basis of the moral character of the Manchus and thus of the dynasty's power. He ordered the compilation of Manchu language genealogies, histories, and ritual handbooks, and in 1747 secretly ordered the compilation of the Shamanic Code, published later in the Sikhu Kwansu. He further solidified the dynasty's cultural and religious claims in Central Asia by ordering a replica of the Potala Palace, the Tibetan temple, to be built on the grounds of the Imperial Summer Palace in Chimda. In order to present himself to Tibetans and Mongols in Buddhist rather than in Confucian terms, he commissioned a thongka, or sacred painting, depicting him as Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. The Qianlong Emperor was a major patron and important preserver and restorer of Confucian culture. He had an insatiable appetite for collecting, and acquired much of China's great private collections by any means necessary, and reintegrated their treasures into the imperial collection. Qianlong, more than any other Manchu emperor, lavished the imperial collection with his attention and effort. The imperial collection had its origins in the 1st century BC, and had gone through many vicissitudes of fire, civil wars and foreign invasions in the centuries that followed. But it was Qianlong who lavished the greatest attention on it, certainly of any of the Manchu rulers. One of the many roles played by Qianlong, with his customary diligence, was that of the emperor as collector and curator. How carefully Qianlong followed the art markets in rare paintings and antiquities, using a team of cultural advisors, from elderly Chinese literati to newly fledged Manchu connoisseurs. These men would help the emperor spot which great private collections might be coming up for sale, either because the fortunes of some previously rich merchant family were unraveling or because the precious objects acquired by Manchu or Chinese grandees during the chaos of the conquest period were no longer valued by those families unregistered trademark surviving heirs. Sometimes too, Qianlong would pressure or even force wealthy courtiers into yielding up choice art objects. He did this by pointing out failings in their work, which might be excused if they made a certain a gift, or, in a couple of celebrated cases, by persuading the current owners that only the secure walls of the Forbidden City and its guardians could save some precious painting from theft or from fire. His massive art collection became an intimate part of his life. He took landscape paintings with him on his travels in order to compare them with the actual landscapes, or to hang them in special rooms in palaces where he lodged, to inscribe them on every visit there. He also regularly added poetic inscriptions to the paintings of the imperial collection, following the example of the emperors of the Song dynasty and the literati painters of the Ming. They were a mark of distinction for the work, and a visible sign of his rightful role as emperor. Most particular to the Qianlong Emperor is another type of inscription, revealing a unique practice of dealing with works of art that he seems to have developed for himself. On certain fixed occasions over a long period he contemplated a number of paintings or works of calligraphy which possessed special meaning for him, inscribing each regularly with mostly private notes on the circumstances of enjoying them, using them almost as a diary. Most of the several thousand jade items in the imperial collection date from his reign. The emperor was also particularly interested in collecting ancient bronzes, bronze mirrors and seals, in addition to pottery, ceramics and applied arts such as enameling, metalwork and lacquer work, which flourished during his reign. A substantial part of his collection is in the Percival David Foundation in London. The Victoria and Albert Museum and the British Museum also have good collections of Qianlong period art. The Qianlong Emperor was a passionate poet and essayist. In his collected writings, which were published in a tenfold series between 1749 and 1800, over 40,000 poems and 1,300 prose texts are listed, making him one of the most prolific writers of all time. There is a long tradition of poems of this sort in praise of particular objects, and the Qianlong Emperor used it in order to link his name both physically and intellectually with ancient artistic tradition. One of Qianlong unregistered trademark's grandest projects was to assemble a team of China unregistered trademark's finest scholars for the purpose of assembling, editing, and printing the largest collection ever made of Chinese philosophy, history, and literature. Known as the Four Treasuries Project, or Sikhu Kwanchu, it was published in 36,000 volumes, containing about 3,450 complete works and employing as many as 15,000 copyists. It preserved numerous books, but was also intended as a way to ferret out and suppress political opponents, requiring the careful examination of private libraries to assemble a list of around 11,000 works from the past, of which about a third were chosen for publication. The works not included were either summarized or in a good many cases scheduled for destruction. Burning of books and modification of texts. Some 2,300 works were listed for total suppression and another 350 for partial suppression. The aim was to destroy the writings that were anti-Qing or rebellious, that insulted previous barbarian dynasties, or that dealt with frontier or defense problems. The full editing of Sikhu Quanchu was completed in about 10 years. During these 10 years, 3,100 titles, about 150,000 copies of books were either burnt or banned. Of those volumes that had been categorized into Sikhu Quanchu, many were subjected to deletion and modification. Books published during the Ming dynasty suffered the greatest damage. The authority would judge any single character or any single sentence's neutrality. If the authority had decided these words, or sentence were derogatory or cynical towards the rulers, then persecution would begin. In Qianlong's time, there were 53 cases of literary inquisition, resulting in the victims being beheaded, or corpses being mutilated, or victims being slowly sliced into pieces until death. As part of the promotion of Kazhang studies in the philological field, Qianlong decided that the Chinese character transcriptions of names and words of the Khitan language in the history of Liao, the Jurchen language in the history of Jin, and the Mongolian language in the history of Yuan were not phonetically accurate and true to the original pronunciation. The histories were in fact hastily compiled and suffered from inaccurate and inconsistent phonetic transcriptions of the same names. He ordered the Imperial Liao Jin Yuan 3 Histories National Language Explanation Project to correct the Chinese character transcriptions by referring to the contemporaneous descendants of those languages. Qianlong identified the Solon language with the Khitan, the Manchu language with the Jurchen, and the Mongolian language with the Mongolian. Solon, Mongolian, and Manchu speakers were consulted with on the correct pronunciations of the names and words, and their Chinese transcriptions were accordingly changed. However, the Khitan language has now been found by modern linguists to be a Mongolic language and is unrelated to the Solon language. The project was part of the Sikhu Quanchu. Qianlong also promulgated a theory that the Dao people were descended from a Khitan clan, changing the Khitan clan name Ae3 Daha, found in the history of Liao, to Ea1/4 C3/4 Daha. The Chinese transcription of the Manchu clan name Naorui Cnoek was edited and inserted in place of the Jurchen clan name Afora Nshc Florin. Literary works. It is most likely that Qianlong used Chinese to first write his Ode to Mukden, and only afterwards issued a Manchu translation, since Chinese was his literary language of choice. Languages. Qianlong claimed to be able to speak Manchu, Chinese, Mongolian, Tibetan, Chagatai and Tangut. He commissioned projects such as new Manchu dictionaries, both monolingual and multilingual like the Pentaglot. Among his directives were to eliminate directly borrowed loanwords from Chinese and replace them with calque translations which were put into new Manchu dictionaries. This showed in the titles of Manchu translations of Chinese works during his reign, which were direct translations contrasted with Manchu books translated during Kangxi's reign, which were Manchu transliterations of the Chinese characters. Qianlong commissioned the Yuding Xie Yutongwen registered trademark Xie, which was a thesaurus of geographic names in Xinjiang in Oirat Mongol, Manchu, Chinese, Tibetan, and Turkey. Tibetan Buddhism. The Qianlong Emperor's faith in Tibetan Buddhism had been questioned in recent times because Qianlong indicated that he supported the Yellow Church just to maintain peace among the Mongols, since the Mongols were followers of the Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama of the Yellow Church, and Qianlong had this explanation placed in the Beijing Tibetan Buddhist Yongzheng Gong Temple on a stele entitled Lama Shuo in 1792, and he also said it was merely in pursuance of our policy of extending our affection to the weak, which led him to patronize the Yellow Church. This explanation of only supporting the Yellow Hats Tibetan Buddhists for practical reasons was used to deflect Han criticism of this policy by Qianlong, who had the Lama Shuo stele engraved in Tibetan, Mongol, Manchu and Chinese, which said, "By patronizing the Yellow Church we maintain peace among the Mongols." This being an important task, we cannot but protect this. We do not show any bias, nor do we wish to adulate the Tibetan priests as Yuan dynasty. Qianlong turned the Palace of Harmony into a Tibetan Buddhist temple for Mongols in 1744 and had an edict inscribed on a stele to commemorate it in Tibetan, Mongolian, Chinese, and Manchu, with most likely Qianlong having first wrote the Chinese version before the Manchu. The Khakur nobles' power was deliberately undermined by Qianlong when he appointed the Tibetan Ishidumba Nima of the Litang royal family of the Eastern Tibetans as the third reincarnated Jetsundumba instead of the Khakur Mongol which they wanted to be appointed. The decision was first protested against by the outer Mongol Khakur nobles and then the Khakurs sought to have him placed at a distance from them at Dalona, but Qianlong snubbed both of their requests, sending the message that he was putting an end to outer Mongolian autonomy. Palaces, Qianlong was an aggressive builder. In the hills northwest of Beijing, he expanded the villa known as the Garden of Perfect Brightness that had been built by his father. He eventually added two new villas, the Garden of Eternal Spring, and the Elegant Spring Garden. In time, the old summer palace would encompass 860 acres, 5 times larger than the Forbidden City. In honor of the 60th birthday of his mother, Empress Dowager Chengxing, Qianlong ordered a lake at the Garden of Clear Ripples dredged, named it Lake Kunming, and renovated a villa on the eastern shore of the lake. He also expanded the imperial palace at Ray, beyond the Great Wall. Ray eventually became effectively a third capital and it was at Ray that Qianlong held court with various Mongol nobles. Qianlong also spent time at the Mulan hunting grounds north of Ray. European styles. For the old summer palace, Qianlong commissioned the Italian Jesuit Giuseppe Castiglione for the construction of the Qianlong, or the Western-style mansion, to satisfy his taste for exotic buildings and objects. He also commissioned the French Jesuit Michel Benest, to design a series of timed waterworks and fountains complete with underground machinery and pipes, for the amusement of the imperial family. The French Jesuit Jean-Denis Attiret also became a painter of the emperor. Jean de Mascagny-Solasti was also a court painter. He co-designed, with Castiglione and Ignatius Sechel-Bart, the Battle Copper Prince. Other architecture. During his reign the Amin minaret was built in Turpan to commemorate Amin Khoja, a Uyghur leader from Turfan who submitted to the Qing as a vassal in order to obtain Qing help to fight the Zungars. Ming dynasty imperial descendants. In 1725 the Yongzheng Emperor bestowed the hereditary title of Marquis on a descendant of the Ming dynasty imperial family, Zhu Ziliang, who received a salary from the Qing government and whose duty was to perform rituals at the Ming tombs, and was also inducted the Chinese plain white banner in the 8 banners. Later the Qianlong Emperor bestowed the title Marquis of Extended Grace posthumously on Zhu Ziliang in 1750. And the title passed on through 12 generations of Ming descendants until the end of the Qing dynasty. Banner system. Qianlong instituted a policy of Mankufying the 8-banner system, which was the basic military and social organization of the dynasty. In the early Qing, Narasi and Hongtaiji categorized Manchu and Han ethnic identity within the 8 banners based on culture, lifestyle, and language, not ancestry or genealogy. Han bannermen were an important part of the banner system. Qianlong changed this definition to one of descent, and demobilized many Han bannermen and urged Manchu bannermen to protect their cultural heritage, language, and martial skills. Qianlong redefined the identity of Han bannermen by saying that they were to be regarded as of having the same culture and being of the same ancestral extraction as Han civilians. Qianlong's view of the Han bannerman also differed from that of his grandfather Kangxi in deciding that loyalty in itself was most important quality. Qianlong sponsored biographies which depicted Chinese bannermen who defected from the Ming to the Qing as traitors and glorifying Ming loyalists. Some of Qianlong's inclusions and omissions on the list of traitors were political in nature, such as including Li Yingfang out of his dislike for his descendant Li Xiao and excluding Ma Mingpei out of concern for his son Mark Xiongzhen's image. The identification and interchangeability between Manchu and Banner people began in the 17th century. Banner people were differentiated from civilians and the term Bannerman was becoming identical with Manchu in the general perception. Qianlong referred to all Bannermen as Manchu, and Qing laws did not say Manchu, but Bannerman. Chinese political identity and frontier policy. Qianlong and the Qing emperors since Shunzi had identified China and the Qing as the same, and in treaties and diplomatic papers the Qing called itself China. The Qianlong Emperor rejected earlier ideas that only Han could be subjects of China and only Han land could be considered as part of China. Instead he redefined China as multi-ethnic, saying in 1755 that there exists a view of China, according to which non-Han people cannot become China's subjects and their land cannot be integrated into the territory of China. This does not represent our dynasty's understanding of China, but is instead that of the earlier Han, Tang, Song, and Ming dynasties. The term Our China was used to stress China's association with themselves by the Qing emperors, with it being used in Kangxi in 1712, used again in 1729, and used by Qianlong in 1750. China and Qing were noticeably and increasingly equated with each other during Qianlong's reign, with Qianlong and the Qing government writing poems and documents using both Zhongguo, the Chinese name for China, Dulim Baiguan, the Manchu name for China. Compared to the rule of previous Qing emperors like Yongzheng and Kangxi, the use of China to refer to the Qing increased under Qianlong, when scholars examined documents on Sino-Russian relations. Other expressions which referred to the Qing like our dynasty were equated and used interchangeably by Qianlong with China when he referred to the Qing Korean border regarding a military outpost and 2 edicts. The Manchu Qianlong Emperor rejected the views of Han officials who said Xinjiang was not part of China and that he should not conquer it, putting forth the view that China was multi-ethnic and did not just refer to Han. Qianlong disregarded the Confucian scholars who criticized his conquest of Xinjiang. Han migration to Xinjiang was permitted by the Manchu Qianlong Emperor, who also gave Chinese names to cities to replace their Mongol names, instituting civil service exams in the area, and implementing the county and prefecture Chinese-style administrative system, and promoting Han migration to Xinjiang to solidify Qing control was supported by numerous Manchu officials under Qianlong. A proposal was written in the Imperial Gazetteer of the Western regions to use state-funded schools to promote Confucianism among Muslims in Xinjiang by Fiheng and his team of Manchu officials in the Qianlong Emperor. Confucian names were given to towns and cities in Xinjiang by the Qianlong Emperor, like Daihua for Urumqi in 1760 and Changji, Fengying, Fukang, Hufu, and Suilai for other cities in Xinjiang. Qianlong also implemented Chinese-style prefectures, departments, and counties in a portion of the region. The French Jesuit Michael Benestre drew a map of China to give to the Qianlong Emperor in 1756 to include Xinjiang after the Qing defeated and conquered the Zhongars and took over the area. The map has previously not included Xinjiang since Benestre used pre-Zhongar conquest sources for the original map. Included as part of China in the map were Qinghai, Tibet, Mongolia, and Manchuria. The Qing Qianlong Emperor compared his achievements with that of the Han and Tang ventures into Central Asia. Qianlong's conquest of Xinjiang was driven by his mindfulness of the examples set by the Han and Tang Qing scholars who wrote the official Imperial Qing Gazetteer for Xinjiang made frequent references to the Han and Tang era names of the region. The Qing conqueror of Xinjiang, Cao Hui, is ranked for his achievements with the Tang dynasty general Gao Xianzi and the Han dynasty generals Ban Chao and Li Guangli. Both aspects the Han and Tang models for ruling Xinjiang were adopted by the Qing and the Qing system also superficially resembled that of nomadic powers like the Kara Khitai, but in reality the Qing system was different from that of the nomads, both in terms of territory conquered geographically and their centralized administrative system, resembling a Western-style system of rule. The Qing portrayed their conquest of Xinjiang in officials' works as a continuation and restoration of the Han and Tang accomplishments in the region, mentioning the previous achievements of those dynasties. The Qing justified their conquest by claiming that the Han and Tang era borders were being restored, and identifying the Han and Tang's grandeur and authority with the Qing. Many Manchu and Mongol Qing writers who wrote about Xinjiang did so in the Chinese language, from a culturally Chinese point of view. Han and Tang era stories about Xinjiang were recounted and ancient Chinese places' names were reused and circulated. Han and Tang era records and accounts of Xinjiang were the only writings on the region available to Qing era Chinese in the 18th century and needed to be replaced with updated accounts by the literati. Han settlement. Han Chinese farmers were resettled from North China by the Qing to the area along the Liao River in order to restore the land to cultivation. Wasteland was reclaimed by Han Chinese squatters in addition to other Han who rented land from Manchu landlords. Despite officially prohibiting Han Chinese settlement on the Manchu and Mongol lands, by the 18th century the Qing decided to settle Han refugees from northern China who were suffering from famine, floods, and drought into Manchuria and Inner Mongolia so that Han Chinese farmed 500,000 hectares in Manchuria and tens of thousands of hectares in Inner Mongolia by the 1780s. Qianlong allowed Han Chinese peasants suffering from drought to move into Manchuria despite him issuing edicts in favor of banning them from 1740 to 1776. Chinese tenant farmers rented or even claimed title to land from the imperial estates, and Manchu lands in the area. Besides moving into the Liao area in southern Manchuria, the path linking Jinshe, Fengxian, Tiling, Changchun, Hulun, and Ningguta was settled by Han Chinese during Qianlong Emperor's rule, and Han Chinese were the majority in urban areas of Manchuria by 1800. To increase the imperial treasury's revenue, the Qing sold formerly Manchu-only lands along the Sugari to Han Chinese at the beginning of the Jiaqing Emperor's reign, and Han Chinese filled up most of Manchuria's towns by the 1840s according to Abbe Huq. In his later years, Qianlong was spoiled with power and glory, becoming disillusioned and complacent in his reign, placing his trust in corrupt officials like Yu Minzhong, and later Heshen. As Heshen was the highest-ranked minister and most favored by Qianlong at the time, the day-to-day governance of the country was left in his hands, while Qianlong himself indulged in the arts, luxuries and literature. When Heshen was executed it was found that his personal fortune exceeded that of the country's depleted treasury, amount to 900 million taels of silver, the total of 12 years of treasury surplus of Manchu Qing court. Qianlong began his reign with about 33,950,000 taels of silver in treasury surplus. At the peak of Qianlong's reign, around 1775, even with further tax cuts, the treasury surplus still reached 73,900,000 taels, a record unmatched by his predecessors, Kangxi or Yongzheng, both of whom had implemented remarkable tax cut policies. However, due to numerous factors such as long-term embezzlement and corruption by officials, frequent expeditions south, huge palace constructions, many war and rebellion campaigns as well as his own extravagant lifestyle, all of these cost the treasury a total of 150,200,000 silver taels. This, coupled with his senior age and the lack of political reforms, ushered the beginning of the gradual decline and eventual demise of the Qing dynasty and empire, casting a shadow over his glorious and brilliant political life. McCartney Embassy. During the mid-18th century, Qianlong began to face pressures from the West to increase foreign trade. The proposed cultural exchange between the British Empire at the time and the Qing Empire collapsed due to many factors. Firstly, there was a lack of any precedent interaction with overseas foreign kingdoms apart from neighboring tributary states to guide Qianlong towards a more informed response. Furthermore, competing worldviews that were incompatible between China and Britain, the former holding entrenched beliefs that China was the central kingdom, and the latter's push for rapid liberalization of trade relations, worsened ties. George Macartney was sent by King George III as ambassador extraordinary to firstly congratulate the emperor on reaching his 80th year and more importantly seek a range of trade concessions. He was granted an audience with the Qianlong Emperor on 2 separate days, the second of which coincided with the emperor's 82nd birthday. There is continued discussion about the nature of the audience, and what level of ceremonials were performed. Demands from the Qing court that the British trade ambassadors kneel and perform the kowtow were strongly resisted by Macartney, and debate continues as to what exactly occurred, differing opinions recorded by Qing courtiers and British delegates. A description of the emperor is provided in the account of one of the visiting Englishmen, Aeneas Anderson. The emperor is about 5 feet 10 inches in height, and of a slender but elegant form. His complexion is comparatively fair, though his eyes are dark. His nose is rather aquiline, and the whole of his countenance presents a perfect regularity of feature, which, by no means, announce the great age he is said to have attained. His person is attracting, and his deportment accompanies by an affability, which, without lessening the dignity of the prince, evinces the amiable character of the man. His dress consisted of a loose robe of yellow silk, a cap of black velvet with a red ball on the top, and adorned with a peacock's feather, which is the peculiar distinction of mandarins of the first class. He wore silk boots embroidered with gold, and a sash of blue girded his waist. It is uncertain whether Anderson actually saw the emperor, or repeated another's sighting, as he was not involved in the ceremonies. Macartney expressed conclusions in his memoirs which were widely disseminated. The Empire of China is an old, crazy, first-rate man of war, which a fortunate succession of able and vigilant officers have contrived to keep afloat for these 150 years past, and to overawe their neighbors merely by her bulk and appearance. But whenever an insufficient man happens to have the command on deck, due to the discipline and safety of the ship, she may, perhaps, not sink outright. She may drift sometime as a wreck, and will then be dashed to pieces on the shore. But she can never be rebuilt on the old bottom. Titsing Embassy. A Dutch embassy arrived to the Qianlong court in 1795, and would turn out to be the last occasion in which any European appeared before the Chinese court within the context of traditional Chinese imperial foreign relations. Representing Dutch and Dutch East India Company interests, Isaac Titsing travelled to Beijing in 1794 €95 for celebrations of the 60th anniversary of the Qianlong Emperor's reign. The Titsing delegation also included the Dutch-American Andreas Everardus van Bramhoekgeest, whose detailed description of this embassy to the Chinese court was soon after published in the US and Europe. Titsing's French translator, copywriter Louis-Joseph de Guines published his own account of the Titsing mission in 1808. Voyager Pascal copyright Kin, Manuel A. Lyle de France provided an alternate perspective and a useful counterpoint to other reports which were then circulating. Titsing himself died before he could publish his version of events. In contrast to Macartney, Isaac Titsing, the Dutch and VOC emissary in 1795 did not refuse to kowtow. In the year following Macartney's rebuff, Titsing and his colleagues were much feted by the Chinese because of what was construed as seemly compliance with conventional court etiquette. Abdication. In October 1795, Qianlong officially announced that in the spring of the following year he would voluntarily abdicate his throne and pass the crown to his son. It was said that Qianlong had made a promise during the year of his ascension not to rule longer than his grandfather, the Kangxi Emperor, who had reigned for 61 years. Qianlong anticipated moving out of the Hall of Mental Cultivation in the Forbidden City. The hall had been conventionally dedicated for the exclusive use of the reigning sovereign, and in 1771 the emperor ordered the beginning of construction on what was ostensibly intended as his retirement residence in another part of the Forbidden City, a lavish, 2-acre walled retreat called the Ning Shogong, or Palace of Tranquil Longevity, today more commonly known as the Qianlong Garden. The complex, completed in 1776, is currently undergoing a 10-year restoration led by the Palace Museum in Beijing and the World Monuments Fund. The first of the restored apartments, Qianlong's Wenqinshe, or Studio of Exhaustion from Diligent Service, began an exhibition tour of the United States in 2010. Qianlong resigned the throne at the age of 85, in the 60th year of his reign, to his son, the Jiaqing Emperor in 1795. For the next 4 years, he held the title Retired Emperor, though he continued to hold on to power and the Jiaqing Emperor ruled only in name. He never moved into his retirement suites in the Qianlong Garden. He died in 1799. Legends. A legend, popularized in fiction, is that Qianlong was the son of Qianlong of Haining. In his choice of heir to the throne, the Kangxi Emperor required not only that the heir be able to govern the empire well but that the heir's son be of no less caliber, thus ensuring the Manchus' everlasting reign over the country. The Yongzheng Emperor's own son was a weakling and he surreptitiously arranged for his daughter to be swapped for Qianlong's son, who became the apple of Kangxi's eye. Thus, Yongzheng got to succeed the throne, and his son, Hongli, subsequently became the Qianlong Emperor. Later, Qianlong went to the southern part of the country 4 times. He stayed in Chen's house in Haining, leaving behind his calligraphy and also frequently issued imperial decrees making and maintaining Haining as a tax-free state. However, there are major problems with this story. First, Yongzheng's eldest surviving son Hongxi was only 7 when Hongli was born, far too young to make the drastic choice of replacing a child of royal birth with an outsider. Second, Yongzheng had 3 other princes who survived to adulthood and had the potential to ascend the throne. Indeed, since Hongxi was the son forced to commit suicide, it would have been far more logical for him to be the adopted son, if any of them were. Stories about Qianlong's 6 visits to the Jiannan area disguised as a commoner have been a popular topic for many generations. In total, he has visited Jiannan 8 times, as opposed to the Kangxi Emperor's 6 inspections. Family. Father, Yongzheng Emperor. Mother, Empress Xiaoshengxian. Spouses, Empresses, Empress Xiaoxiankun, Yulinara, the Steppe Empress, Empress Xiaoshan. Imperial Noble Consorts, Imperial Noble Consort Uxiani 1/4 gigapascal Xi micro-A Florini 1/4 per mil, Imperial Noble Consort Chunhe 1/4 CE Florin CSHE micro-A Florini 1/4 per mil, Imperial Noble Consort Kangxi 1/4 Oishi micro-A Florini 1/4 per mil, Imperial Noble Consort Zemin, from the Fuka clan. Imperial Noble Consort Shuja, from the Jinjia clan. Noble Consorts, Noble Consort Wani 1/4 copyright per mil E micro-A Florini 1/4 per mil, Noble Consort Ying, Noble Consort Zin, Noble Consort Yu, from the Kelayat clan. Noble Consort Zun. Consorts, Consort Jin, from the Fuka clan. Consort Ronji 1/4 E unregistered trademark A Florini 1/4 OLA Florini 1/4 per mil, Consort Shu, Consort Dun. Imperial Concubines, Imperial Concubine Yi, from the Huang clan. Imperial Concubine Zun, from the Huishwu clan. Imperial Concubine Gong, from the Ling clan. Imperial Concubine Yi, from the Bo clan. Imperial Concubine Shen, from the Bailurgesi clan. Imperial Concubine Cheng, from the Nauru clan. Noble Ladies, Noble Lady Shun, Lady Silanjaro, Lady Bo, Noble Lady Rui, from the Swatchua Luo clan. Noble Lady Duo, from the Borjigit clan. Noble Lady Wu, Noble Lady Jin, Noble Lady Zin, Noble Lady Fu. First Class Female Attendants, First Class Female Attendant Bai, First Class Female Attendant QE, First Class Female Attendant Ning, First Class Female Attendant Ping, First Class Female Attendant Na. Sons, daughters. The personal names of the Qianlong Emperor's daughters are not known. The Qianlong Emperor adopted a niece, Hezuo Princess Huan. She was the daughter of the Qianlong Emperor's younger half-brother Hunzhou and Hunzhou's primary spouse Lady Airku. Ancestry, see also, Jean-Joseph Maria Meet, Giuseppe Castiglione, Mainan Lidang, Canton System, Ziyang Lu, Long Corridor, Putu Zongkeng Temple, Qianlong Dynasty. Notes: 1. The Qianlong era name, however, started only on February 12, 1736, the first day of that lunar year. February 8, 1796 was the last day of the lunar year known in Chinese as the 60th year of Qianlong. References, citations. Works consulted. Berger, Patricia Ann. Empire of Emptiness, Buddhist Art and Political Authority in Qing China. University of Hawaii Press. ISBN A0824825632. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Clark, Michael Edmund. In the Eye of Power, China and Xinjiang from the Qing Conquest to the New Great Game for Central Asia 1759 2004. Griffith University, Brisbane, Doctoral Thesis, Department of International Business and Asian Studies. Crossley, Pamela Kyle. A Translucent Mirror, History and Identity in Qing Imperial Ideology. University of California Press. ISBN A0520928849. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Crossley, Pamela Kyle. Kagan, Kimberly, ed. The Imperial Moment. Paul Bushkovich, Nicholas Canny, Pamela Kyle Crossley, Arthur Eckstein, Frank Ninkovich, Lauren J. Sammons. Harvard University Press. ISBN A0674054091. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Dunnell, Ruth W. Elliott, Mark C. Forret, Philippe. Millward, James A. New Qing Imperial History, The Making of Eurasian Empire at Qing Shunda. Routledge. ISBN A1134362,226. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Elliott, Mark C. The Manchu Way, The Eight Banners and Ethnic Identity in Late Imperial China. Stanford University Press. ISBN A0804746842. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Hammond, Kenneth James. Stapleton, Kristen Eileen, eds. The Human Tradition in Modern China. Rowman and Littlefield. ISBN A0742554666. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Liu, Tao Tao. Farr, David. Unity and Diversity, Local Cultures and Identities in China. Hong Kong University Press. ISBN A9622094,023. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Lopez, Donald S. Prisoners of Shangri-La, Tibetan Buddhism and the West. University of Chicago Press. ISBN A0226493113. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Millward, James A. Beyond the Pass, Economy, Ethnicity, and Empire in Qing Central Asia, 1759–1864. Stanford University Press. ISBN A0804729336. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Millward, James A. Eurasian Crossroads, A History of Xinjiang. Columbia University Press. ISBN A0231139241. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Nakin, Susan. Peking, Temples and City Life, 1400–1900. University of California Press. ISBN A0520923456. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Newby, L.J. The Empire and the Khanate, A Political History of Qing Relations with Kokand c. 1760–1860. Volume 16 of Brill's Eurasian Library. Brill ISBN A904145508. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Rawski, Evelyn S. The Last Emperors, A Social History of Qing Imperial Institutions. University of California Press. ISBN A0520926796. Retrieved March 10, 2014. Reardon Anderson, James. Land Use and Society in Manchuria and Inner Mongolia during the Qing Dynasty. Environmental History 5, 503 Euro 530. JSTORA 3985584. Scarping, Thomas. Minorities, Majorities and National Expansion, The History and Politics of Population Development in Manchuria 1610–1993. Cologne China Studies Online Euro Working Papers on Chinese Politics, Economy and Society. Retrieved August 14, 2014. Cao, Gang. Reinventing China, Imperial Qing Ideology and the Rise of Modern Chinese National Identity in the Early 20th Century 32. Sage Publications. doi, 10.1177/00977004052822349. JSTORA 20062627. Archived from the original on March 25, 2014. Retrieved April 17, 2014. Further reading, Chang, Michael. A Court on Horseback, Imperial Touring and the Construction of Qing Rule, 1680–1785. Cambridge, Harvard University Asia Center. Crossley, Pamela. A Translucent Mirror, History and Identity in Qing Imperial Ideology. 10 ISBN 0-520-23424-3. 13 ISBN 978-0-520-23424-6. Elliott, Mark C. Emperor Qianlong, Son of Heaven, Man of the World. ISBN 9780321084446. Ho Chiu-Imu, Bennett Bronson. Splendors of China's Forbidden City, The Glorious Reign of Emperor Qianlong. ISBN 1858942039. Khan, Harold L. Monarchy in the Emperor's Eyes, Image and Reality in the Qianlong Reign. ISBN 0674582306. Kuhn, Philip A. Sales Dealers, The Chinese Sorcery Scare of 1768. ISBN 0674821513. James A. Millward, Ruth W. Dunnell, Mark C. Elliott and Philippe Foret ed., New Qing Imperial History, The Making of Eurasian Empire at Qing Xiongda. ISBN 0415320062. Nancy Berliner, The Emperor's Private Paradise, Treasures from the Forbidden City. ISBN 978-087577-221-8. Works by the Qianlong Emperor, Chien-lung. The Conquest of the Mure-Tse, an Imperial Poem. Entitled A Choral Song of Harmony for the First Part of the Spring, Tr. By S. Weston, from the Chinese. Translated by Stephen Weston. London, printed and sold by C. and R. Baldwin, New Bridge Street, Blackfriars. Retrieved April 24, 2014. A.